Hello, welcome to Friday I'm in Bed.
Podcast for midlife women living their best life, but in bed by 10.
This week on Friday I'm in Bed, we're starting with a backlash around Chappell Roan after upsetting two young fans. She set some boundaries, the press don't like it, and we're asking whether this has turned into a bit of a pile-on. Do celebrities actually owe us access, time, or their emotional energy, or is that something we've just come to expect?
Then we're talking about pubs going child-free. Is it anti-child or just a case of adults wanting a quiet meal without someone else's toddler doing laps around the table? Where's the line between inclusion and choice? So grab a cuppa and let's get into it.
Hi, Kate. How are you this week?
I'm good, thank you. I'm well rested after a week in Spain. How are you?
I am not well rested. I went to a ball at the weekend, which was very exciting, and I felt amazing. I felt super glamorous. I had a gorgeous dress that I got from Phase 8. It was like 300 quid, and then I bought it for 100 quid in the sale. Yay. Why is that? I just have to tell everyone that. I'm like, such a bargain. But yeah, I felt amazing. However, it was like on the night that the clocks changed. So not only was I not in bed by 10, I also lost an hour overnight, and it will take me about, 7 or 8 years to catch up, I reckon.
Yes, I had double whammy because we came back from Spain on Saturday afternoon, obviously lost an hour when we landed and then lost an hour that night. And it was like, I've just lost 2 hours of my life. Not happy about this.
Does that mean you have to go to Spain again in October so that you can get that hour back?
To be honest with you, we are going away the week the clocks change because it changes at the end of October, doesn't it? And that's half term.
Yeah.
And that's our 20th anniversary. So we are going away that week. So maybe I should be looking at the time aspect rather than finding somewhere hot. But actually, I won't worry about that. I'll just find somewhere nice to go to.
Yeah, no, you might get it back again.
You never know.
And if you do you keep getting younger if you keep rolling that over?
Yeah.
Is that how that works?
I don't know. I think I get tired. That is for sure. It was lovely.
It might take 24 years to you to even gain one day or something.
Yeah,
that feels like maths that someone else should work out for me, not me.
Absolutely. We went away without our teenagers, and I had a real moment of how much lighter I felt without them. And obviously, when you go away with little kids, it's hard work because you're ferrying, you've got all this luggage and all these little people that you need to be responsible for. But when they're teenagers, they kind of just get on with it. But what I didn't realize was how much time I spend going, are we all here? Who needs a toilet? And also, Mum, can I have a Subway? Can I have a McDonald's? Just all this stuff. Not having it was absolutely wonderful. But now I'm back to them and their demands.
Well, that might tie in quite nicely to some of today's stuff, mightn't it?
Yes, quite a few parenting things this week. So we better get into it.
Yeah.
The first topic of the day is Chappell Roan. And this has been kind of bubbling under on my news feed just before I went on holiday, and it kind of is still there. So I thought it would be great to talk about this. So Chappell Roan gives some history. About 2 years ago, when she was becoming uber famous, or she was really on the way up, pushed back at the paparazzi on a red carpet and was kind of you need to just back off a bit. She basically set her boundaries and was a bit overwhelmed by them, and also the kind of things they shout and, that kind of culture that we have seen on red carpets forever and a day. She pushed back, and that started a bit of a movement of particularly young celebrities doing the same. And Millie Bobby Brown did the same, and she was like, no, don't tell me to smile. So there was this real setting boundaries, backlash probably the wrong word, but this setting boundaries thing. And then last year, Sabrina Carpenter on the red carpet commented on how quiet all the photographers were and said Chappell's really started a movement here. So this is kind of the history of what's Chappell Roan's been doing over the last couple of years. For anyone that doesn't know who Chappell Roan is, go and Google her. She's a huge female young American artist that's doing amazingly well and is super talented. So she's been sort of making moves in the world around setting her boundaries. And then what's happened in the last 2 weeks is there's been a couple of stories come out around her being disrespectful to fans. So the first story goes like this, that there is a footballer who I don't know how to say his name. Gigno? I don't know. An Arsenal footballer. Arsenal and Chelsea, I don't know who he plays for now. Anyway, he saw Chappell eating her breakfast in a hotel, and him and his daughter walked past, and her security basically kind of batted them away, berated her is what they've said. And the child was very upset by this. Then the mayor or the governor of Brazil, because this was all in Brazil, kind of waded in and was like, we're not going to invite her to our festival anymore. She is bad. So then Jude Law's daughter, I think it might have been Jude Law's ex-wife, I'm not sure, said, well, actually, a similar thing happened to my daughter with Chappell Roan. It's turned out that it was the security person that basically said, don't film, which is what was happening in the Jude Law case. And in the footballer case, he just was like, get away kind of thing. So there's been a lot of press about this, and kind of like everybody has kind of been piling on and sharing their anti-Chappell Roan stories. There's been stuff around her working for Mac. There's famously left-wing liberal in her views. So, there's a lot of kind of anti-Chappell Roan rhetoric because she's an outspoken, successful lesbian woman, young woman, who is woke in inverted commas. There's a lot of anti that. It's all been bubbling under, and it's all just kind of exploded in the last week. But there's a couple of interesting things I want to add before I throw this out, and is that we've now found out that 23% of the negative stuff been written around her in the last week or two has been by bots. So 4% of the entire content around her was created by bots, and 23% of the negative stuff has been created by bots, which is making, which is adding to this feeling of like, this is all a bit premeditated. I remember when I saw it first, I was like, oh, this feels like a pile-on. And then Jameela Jamil made a post around women are only allowed to be successful for 2 years, and then the pile-on happens, then we need to drag her down. So this isn't just about Chappell Roan. This is about boundary setting. This is about how we treat celebrities, how the media treats them, especially in light of how Britney or Princess Diana or Amy Winehouse were treated. They love to pull them up and then drag them down. So yeah, Chappell Roan. Have you seen any of the content around Chappell? Have you seen any of the bot content in the last 2 weeks?
I mean, oh yeah. I mean, like, who hasn't? It's kind of been everywhere. Because first of all, I was a bit like, oh, and I kind of looked up the story, and then I was like, was it footballer or was it Jude Law? And then I realised that there were two. Oh my gosh, two of them. How dare we? All right, I have to start by like, I'm going to make a confession. I don't understand bots.
Right, okay.
I'm assuming, I mean, I know that obviously, bots always used to be like, they would just, you would get bot traffic to your website, for instance. And it basically meant, they were like crawlers that were visiting your website, looking for content kind of thing, seeing what was on there. But when bots are actually like having conversations and like leaving comments on posts, I kind of like, what are they for and why are they for? And like, who is this all supposed to be some kind of like big conspiracy? I know I've heard stuff like, it's supposed to be like some big kind of like Russian content farm or something. Is it AI? What are the bots doing and why?
Well,
you tell me.
I am not an expert in bots, but let's just put it in. This is my simplistic explanation of bots, and I'm no way an expert, so I could be totally wrong. Yes, there are people in charge, the big guns that want to change the narrative. So it could be make us more right-wing. It could be win elections. And then these farms, a lot of them are in Russia, there must be others, create this content, whether it's comments or content, and it's pushed out. And I don't know how they do that. I mean, who knows? Must be AI, must be It's technology. But there are decision makers making decisions about our thoughts about things. So, for example, the race riots that happened, I think it was 2 years ago in the UK, off the back of the awful stabbing of the 3 young girls at the Taylor Swift look-alike dancer concerty
Yeah.
party thing, they found out that a lot of the creating momentum to go out and protest and do bad things and wreck the place and all of that, the content and the groups and the information that was coming out was from Russian bots. So there was somebody making the content to get us to think in a certain way and go out and do it. And back to Chappell, if they want to bring her down, that's a great way of doing it. I think Taylor Swift there's been lots of stuff that happened to Taylor Swift.
That's what I had that on my notes. I just kind of figured that if I don't really get it, probably some other people don't either. So I kind of, it's just one of those things where you go, I've always just assumed, like, I go, oh yeah, bots. And then when I was looking at this story, I kind of went, maybe I don't really get them.
I think it's partly because rewind 30 years, the Sun, the Mirror, etc., had so much power, and they'd print a front page of Britney, let's just say, having a meltdown or how she was chased or, that kind of stuff. And we all read it and we all believed it and we all had an opinion. But that's kind of gone now. So therefore, we need to have this through Instagram posts, which is a bit worrying. But anyway.
Yeah. See, I found kind of so this is in the same week. So this is one of the things that I was kind of interested about is that Shia LaBeouf, the contrast with how Shia LaBeouf was treated that same week. So
who was that?
The same week this Chappell Roan stuff came out, he was apparently filmed screaming expletives at women in a Rome cafe, which was after a battery arrest and wandering a hotel in his underwear. And he got 7 articles written on him for doing that, whereas the Chappell Roan thing got over 125 in 2 days.
And it wasn't even, it was her security guard type of thing. So it's kind of like, the different.
And it wasn't even her. Yeah, she didn't even do anything. So, yeah, I've got kind of loads of things like that. And we were talking about, Britney, Janet Jackson, career destroyed, for apparently revealing a nipple at the Super Bowl.
I know. And
whereas Justin Timberlake just went straight to string.
Yeah. On holiday, I listened to a podcast, We Need to Talk, which I love that podcast. And Blake, Amy Winehouse's ex-husband, was interviewed. It was the first interview he's ever given. And he talked about the role of the press. He totally takes responsibility for the stuff he's done, but he talked about the press and how they talked about her weight and her skin the whole time to the point that it led to serious bulimia, and things like that. And so this is you're just still hearing the things we kind of thought were happening back then. Are they still happening now? And it's just a bit worrying. So these young people, these Gen Zs, are pushing back and saying, no, I might be a celebrity, but you can't talk to me that way and you can't treat me that way and you can't be in my face and I need you to stop. But there's a lot of people that are quite upset that these young women are doing that because, that's
women specifically.
Yeah, how dare they?
I feel like there's so many strands to this story. Strand 1 is the actual incident itself and how it relates to Chappell Roan. Is she allowed to set those boundaries around herself? Did she even set these boundaries? Because, what's coming out about these stories afterwards is her saying, well, I had no idea they weren't even there. The security guard was the one that pushed them away. And the security guard saying, yeah, I pushed them away. And then other people are coming back and going, but would the security guard do that if he wasn't told to? So that's the incident.
Let's let the man off. Yeah.
It's strand 1. Then strand 2 is whether this is a female specific kind of thing, because there's all sorts around that, isn't it? Because it was children that apparently wanted her attention. So obviously as a child free, and she's lesbian, yeah. Yeah. So as a child free gay woman, she's obviously top of the list to be she's evil.
And she's talented.
So the fact that it was and talented, yeah. And so the fact that it was, children that were involved in these 2 alleged incidents are just another kind of stick to beat her with about how would somebody think of the children?
Yeah, exactly.
And then What was that? That was strand 2. There was a third strand as well. I
I
can't
think
remember what it was now. What was strand 2? Strand 2 was whether like the fact that it was children and her. And then strand 3 is like the bots and the why are they pushing that narrative particularly? Why is it that more like a global strand, I guess? What are they trying? What are the evil bots trying to tell us about what they want us to think?
Can I add a strand 4?
Yeah.
Back to our word of the year, parasocial. What is it with us that not us, like not you and me, where we feel a celebrity owes us something? And is it linked to the fact that we see, behind the scenes all the time on Insta, we see their stories, it's like we know them. So if they're eating breakfast, surely I can go up and say hi. Well, maybe I don't have to do that. Maybe I could just go, oh, look, that's Chappell Roan over there. She looks nice, and then carry on eating my breakfast.
Yeah. I mean, okay, because that's the I mean, celebrities have been being pestered in public for years, right?
Mm.
That's nothing new. That's nothing new with I think maybe like the parasocial thing is then more like because we feel like we know them now. Like, so they've always been pestered in public, but do we feel more entitled to that pestering now because we feel like we know them better because we've seen them eating their breakfast on Instagram? So then when we see them eating their breakfast in real life, we're like, hey, Chappell, how are you?
Maybe. But then I chatted to my daughter about this before recording, because she was like, oh, if you saw Simon Neil, who's the lead singer of Biffy Clyro, you'd be over there. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I would. I'd want to, but I'd feel slightly icky going, oh, you're my hero, and I have a photo with you. And then I said to her, if we were... She's obsessed with Ariana Grande. And I said, if we were at like the Wicked premiere and we're standing on the barrier and she comes over, I'm going to take a picture of her with you. Absolutely. But if we just sort of see her eating breakfast in a hotel like Chappell Roan, will we? I know you'll want me to, but it will feel just a bit, yeah. And it reminds me of, there's a Paul McCartney video that I saw where he was crossing the road, and at the crossing, somebody came over and started videoing him. Now, actually, they don't think they even asked him. They weren't in it. They were just videoing him. And he was like, no, can we not do this? It's like, leave me alone. I'm literally just walking across the road. Like, leave me alone. So, but then, as you said, celebs have been pestered forever and a day, haven't they?
Yeah. See, now I was intrigued actually because I'm going back in my notes. Was
the
she
Jude
not
Law one they were
they not
videoing from further away.
Were they filming?
And I think security was like,
okay,
no, turn it off, type of thing.
Okay. It's just because I found that quite interesting because again, there's like, I mean, you see, people would be very tempted to kind of go, oh my God, look who's over there, like, and get the picture, like, without telling someone they're being photographed with. Is that worse than going over and pestering someone? Is it worse, like, photographing and recording people when they don't know that it's happening? I mean, so if you're a celebrity, do you have to just assume that you're constantly on video and being recorded the whole time you're in public? So, like, obviously, I am not a celebrity, but back in ye oldie vintage days, I can remember being at a vintage fair once. So I was all, done up in my vintage finery, had my hair all nicely done and a nice frock on and my seam stockings and, all that kind of lark. And I was eating a bacon sandwich. It was my breakfast. I was having a bacon sandwich. And I suddenly noticed someone was taking a photograph of me eating my bacon sandwich. And I was like, is this what we do now? We just take photographs of, and obviously they decided that like vintage lady eats bacon sandwich would make a lovely photograph for them. And you go, but I'm a human being just having my lunch or breakfast, whatever. Is that okay to just take photographs of people just because they happen to be in a public place doing like, bacon sandwich eating?
I think, back to you saying that celebs have always been pestered. But we haven't always had smartphones, have we? And videos and high quality videos and zoom in, which is amazing. So you can take a video of somebody eating their bacon sandwich from miles away, which you couldn't before. So actually maybe it is more invasive than it used to be, because it used to just be the paparazzi. But now it's like all of us.
I think that it's very easy. There's all this, you'd be nothing without your fans. And you go, yes, but that's fine. But, they are consuming a product that you put out. Does that give them some kind of entitlement to your private life or like to interrupt you while you're having breakfast? do you automatically give up any right to essentially privacy if you happen to be in a public or semi-public space?
Yeah, and people will probably say, well, she shouldn't be there then. Well, so she has to eat her breakfast in her bedroom then. Because, why can't she, if she's paid to be in the hotel, why can't she sit in the hotel restaurant? But I think let's talk about the bringing successful women down. Because it was definitely, when I read it, I was like, oh, hang on a minute. Because I've seen bits of press over the last 6 months, like anti her rhetoric. I've started to see it coming through. And so when I saw the first post or news story about it, I was like, And then, as I said in the intro, that Jameela Jamil made this really interesting post about how women are only allowed to be at top of their game for 2 years. That's kind of it, really. And then, she needs to be taken down a peg or two. And that definitely, to me, feels like what's happening. What is that all about, do we think? That you're only allowed to be successful for 2 years or, a short space of time? Or is it that we just don't
Yeah, I
like
feel
people to
like
get too big?
don't like women to get too big for their boots, maybe. Like, do you definitely see that happening? And I think there's always been that kind of slightly different attitude to successful women as opposed to successful men, hasn't there? When you get a successful man, it's because he's worked hard, whereas a successful woman is like, you owe everything to your fans. And, it's not exclusive. Sometimes men will get a bit of that pushback as well. And sometimes women can get away with it for a bit longer. But you do tend to get a bit of that divide. And with shall we call it the current political climate?
Yes.
Someone like Chappell Roan, who is very obviously on the woke side of the current political climate, is going to get more pushback from the bots, I guess, and that kind of thing. I would say that I definitely see, 2 years feels like a very firm cutoff point, but I definitely see that happening. You saw it happening with Amy Winehouse, you mentioned earlier, saw it happening with Britney Spears. Do you think it's only with women in the public eye, or do you think that that's a thing that happens in other professions? Do you think that,
I
as
think
women climb the corporate ladder, we see similar kind of
I think there's
things
definitely
happening?
the rhetoric that you mentioned it a minute ago. Too big for her boots is a great expression, isn't it? Because have you ever heard too big for his boots? I think I'm not sure of the answer of that, but one thing that did just spring to my mind was I did see a post, and I meant to look into this a bit more before we started talking, but it was Billie Eilish, who has been very vocal throughout her entire career about politics, her political viewpoint, and will use her platform if she wins an award, for example, to say. And I did see, I don't know if it was either her brother saying it or her saying it, is that they are trying to bring me down. There are people out there that are really actively trying to ruin my career. I need to look into that. Sorry, I haven't any more than that, but it's like, all right. So she's had longer than 2 years, let's face it, Billie Eilish. But she's a strong, successful, talented, alternative as well woman who will not shy away from saying what she thinks. And I think I don't know if this has always been the case, but there's definitely it's linked actually to the whole manosphere thing we talked about a couple of weeks ago, about wanting, and when we talked about Pilates Princess as well, we don't want too much drama, which means we don't want a woman with opinion, which means we don't want a woman that's political, which means I don't want a woman that's left wing. Like, it carries on and on and on and on and on. So it's like, there is a feeling, particularly right now, that we are not wanted. And so I think the fact that it's Chappell with her stance on the world and her political leanings and her sexuality and her success, it's all really, really intrinsically linked, I think, personally.
It's very difficult to know how this could impact women who weren't in the public eye, because obviously if we know about it by definition, they are in the public eye, right? So,
Yeah.
for instance, you could say, women in politics, for instance, they were getting a lot of Hannah, the new Green MP.
Yeah.
Hannah, I forget her surname. She's like Hannah the plumber on Instagram. But she's getting a lot of pushback, and they start to push back on things like, "Oh God, she dresses like a toddler. That's not appropriate," and things like that. So again, they're picking on her for particularly women things. And there was the politician years ago with the leopard print shoes and things like that.
Theresa
So
May.
you get that kind of thing. But then obviously they are in the public eye also.
Well,
So
I've got an example then.
I wish I'd thought of this before. I'd have looked into it. Like,
Well,
do women in like the boardroom get it?
Well, it starts young. I'll talk you through a story that my daughter was in year 4. So she, 8, 7. Anyway, her and this boy had become like the leaders, like the top dogs, let's just call them. And they were beginning to rule the roost in the playground. I can't remember why or whatever, but they'd obviously rose to the top of some kind of hierarchy. Anyway, I got called in. The mother of the boy didn't get called in. And repeatedly, the teacher said to me they were concerned that she was becoming too bossy. And I repeatedly, every time he said bossy, I said, "You mean confident?" And then he'd go, and then carry on talking. And then he'd say bossy again. And I would go, "You mean confident?" And I remember I said it about 5 times, and my husband sat back and was like watching this unfold, but I'm not saying he wasn't supporting me. He was in America. "You ain't going to win this, mate." "You ain't going to win this." And I remember saying, so my daughter used to lack confidence and wouldn't say boo to a goose and didn't have a lot of friends and was a bit bullied. And now she's like ruling the roost or whatever. She's got her little gang. He was upset that somebody had said the word gang. And I was like, yeah, but I don't think they're talking about, the Bloods and the whatever. Like we're talking about, they're 7.
8-year-olds.
Do you know what I mean? And he was really upset about the word gang. And I was really upset about the word bossy. And I just kept saying, have you, and what about the boys' parents? Are they being brought in? Is he bossy? And they were like, "Oh, no, no, no." And I think back to this too big for your boots. My daughter was told she was too big for her boots at 7 years old. And the boy, who was also too big for his boots, wasn't brought in. And I think you hear about words like bossy, and you hear about, well, we know that girls are treated differently. But I sat through it. So I think girls are told to not be too much because they're told that in primary school.
Yeah, that is interesting because obviously we do know, for instance, that there are actually studies, on kind of corporate world where their women are told that the perception is that women talk more than men when actually they're speaking less than men, and that that people use the words kind of, whereas men are assertive, women are bossy, kind of that kind of thing, and that women are punished in corporate land for allegedly getting kind of too big to their boots. So we do know that. So I guess that is there. I guess it's a slightly different thing once you've already got the job. They don't give you 2 years and then go, "Well, we're going to fire you because you're too bossy." But maybe they never get there in the first place if they're too bossy.
I don't know. I think people fear strong women. And I also think it's so ingrained at such a young age that you mustn't be. I remember saying to the teacher, I would rather have a confident girl than the girl we had a year ago that wouldn't speak. We should be celebrating this. Instead, I've been hauled in, literally, we need a meeting to talk about Kitty Beavis being bossy. And it's like, what are we talking about?
You go, what is she bossing?
The gang.
Yeah. And what has she done with this power that's been so negative?
I don't know. She probably decided they were playing rounders today, and then everyone played rounders. I mean, we would
yeah.
And obviously we don't teach any young person to be rude and nasty or aggressive or whatever. But, it starts young, doesn't it? And it's the language piece. And I think one thing as I've done as a parent is talk about to my children setting boundaries. The young people, Gen Zs, are really into the word boundary. And I think it's amazing and I'm all here for it. Because actually, no, you don't talk to me like that. You don't treat me like that. And I know I was brought up in a time when we had to put up with it. We had to put up with sexist jokes and being groped in the workplace or in the, or wolf whistled, or we just were told to put up with it. And young people are going, "Na, na, 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 na." And I think, like, I'm really proud of them. I'm like, "Well done." It's a good thing.
I do think that not only what we said before about that kind of critical thinking. So when you see a story like this, use your critical thinking and think, would this be a story I would see if it was
Jude
a
Law.
man's security guard who'd asked them to stop filming or whatever? But also, I think it is becoming increasingly important to wonder if, like, these stories are
Real.
I mean, obviously we know to look for AI and things like that, but is it becoming increasingly important to think about who is benefiting from this story, and is it even true? The bots
Absolutely.
thing is becoming such a massive thing that we need to consider whether this is even a story or if it's literally been made up by non-existent pieces of internet code.
And that is really scary, isn't it?
It is. Okay, so the topic I want to talk about now does kind of tie in a little bit to the Chappell Roan chat, because it's about public spaces and children in public spaces. So there's a kind of loose link there. So this comes from an article in Stylist magazine website, whatever, Stylist, about the Kenton in Hackney. I did my research very specifically, banning children from the pub. So the article was a woman saying that she's not surprised that this pub is local to her. She's not surprised that it has banned children, because she once took her child in there on a rainy Saturday afternoon, and they were constantly telling her that she needed to keep her children under control, and that basically she was made to feel unwelcome in the pub. And that, how do children learn to behave if they're never allowed to go anywhere? And how can a pub claim to be community-led if part of the community is banned from it? There was also discussion about whether this was effectively banning mothers from the pub, because women are primarily responsible still for childcare, and therefore whether this was essentially a feminist issue, whether this was unfairly affecting women to be banned from the pubs. Now, pub previously had a 5 p.m. curfew. The pub does not sell food. And now the pub has banned children under 18 completely.
Under 18?
Yes. Yeah. Under 18, I think. But then I think I'll get onto that in a bit. Don't worry. That is interesting. But yeah,
Yes.
under 18. So it's a drinks only, no food, shows football. It's had the same owner for 17 years. That owner is a father. There you go. And there are other pubs in the area that have followed suit. So the William IV has apparently implemented a 7 p.m. curfew, and another one has banned under 10s outright. And he's saying that after all this press coverage of his ban, he's received a lot of other operators that have contacted him for advice. There were real safety incidences that have incidences that have informed this decision. Apparently a 3-year-old fell through a cellar hatch while the parents were elsewhere. Yeah. And a 5-year-old collided with staff carrying drinks, and therefore there was then ended up with broken glass anywhere. They also had problem with kids approaching and poking dogs, which was then causing dogs to obviously get annoyed with the kids. And he said that entitled parents have a lack of understanding when they're in a public space, that they have to look after their children and they need to behave appropriately, and that staff who had approached parents when there were concerns were met with confrontation. Well, what have we done something wrong? That's my confrontation voice, just so you know. So yeah, so there are obviously real safety concerns there. The landlord is a dad himself. He has a 7-year-old, says he takes him to pubs, but when he does, he takes board games, crayons, and he knows they basically have a 1-hour window where the child will be under control before they know that it's time to take them home. And he also says that the response to the ban has been kind of 98% positive. I mean, I don't know if that was a precise 98% or just mostly positive, but there we go.
Surveyed 100 people.
Yes,
And 98,
exactly.
98 people were happy.
Yes. So he also said that they've been getting regulars who had been staying away at the weekends because of noise from children that have started coming back now, which is interesting. So I kind of have a few things that I want to talk about on this. So I thought this was interesting because I do not have children. You do have children. I have dogs that I want to take to pubs with me, one of which is doing some really loud snoring right now behind me. So my view on this has always been, and I have been in this situation before, is that pubs aren't spaces for children. Especially not if this isn't a pub that serves food or has particularly advertised itself as child friendly. It's not that, I never went to pubs when I was a child. Like, I'd been in them, but they generally tended to be ones that were, promoted as child friendly, and they were, full of kids running around doing whatever it is that kids do. I can understand that part of the argument that was in the Stylist article is that this would disproportionately impact women because they are often primary caretakers, and that she says mothers move through the world in a state of low-level apology and are pushed into ever smaller and smaller spaces. But one of the things I did note from the article is that she said that after they'd received 2 or 3 reminders that they needed to keep their children under control, they realised they weren't welcome, left their drinks, and then went home in the rain. And I thought, well, if you've had to have 2 or 3 reminders that you need to keep your children under control, were they not under control? What were they doing?
I have so much to say.
And there seems to be this suggestion that children, how awful it is that children would behave like children and not be sat still like perfect little soldiers. And again, my argument would be that if they are in what is essentially an adult space, maybe they should be sat perfectly still like little soldiers, because that's not their space. Oh, I can see you getting all twitchy, Kate. What do you tell me? Tell me, you go.
I have so much to say. So sorry in advance. First of all, your comment about if we don't bring our children into public spaces, when will they learn how to behave in public spaces? Or it's a bit like taking your dog. To be fair, my dog barks to the point where we don't take him anywhere. But if we don't take him anywhere, he's never going to get used to not barking. So it's one of those chicken and egg thing. So I kind of get that. I do get that it's often quite female, I was going to say led, it's not the right word, but, affects women more because we're generally the primary carer. But I do believe that if you're in an environment where your child can't behave in that environment that's right for that environment, then you shouldn't be in that environment. So, I've got so much to say. My son, when he was a baby, we started taking him out. He went out with us everywhere. He went to the pub. He went to restaurants and stuff as a baby, and he sat and he, played with his instrument, not his instrument, like his whatever he had, his rattle or whatever. And then when he got to a certain age, when he would have just run ragged around the place, we might not go to that restaurant, because nobody wants a child running around a restaurant when you're eating. So I'm kind of conflicted. I get the bit that, you do need to be able to take your children out, but I fundamentally really believe that a pub or somewhere like that, where people are going to have a quiet pint or to meet their friends, don't need 25 kids running around when they could be in the park doing that. So yeah, I'm kind of like, I've got lots to say, but I almost can't spit it out. I think I'm in agreement with so much of what you said, even as a parent. For example, I used to belong to a gym, and it was an expensive gym. And I joined that gym because I wanted to go, and I thought I could work there as well, and I could become like my second office. So I could go to a class or go for a swim, and then I could work on my laptop and da-da-da. There was so many kids there, because there was this big creche area, but not a creche, as in children running everywhere, that I was like, I can't work here. I don't, this isn't pleasurable for me. Even as a parent, like, I didn't want to be there. I don't want to be surrounded by loads and loads of children all the time. So as a parent, I don't necessarily want that either. But I think I need a specific question, because I'm waffling. Because I'm just like, about the whole thing.
One of the things I felt was that you see this a lot, isn't there? That this kind of have it all culture. And again, it's maybe something that's specifically quite often aimed at women. Can women have it all? A family and a social life and a career. And again, never gets asked to men. So yeah, I absolutely get how things like that are gendered. But when she says we're banning people from more and more spaces, maybe we didn't need to ban children from more and more spaces, because there was a kind of a self-ban? What am I saying? Like a self-restriction, maybe, where, we didn't take children to places where we kind of knew that they weren't going to be welcome. People say, well, I'm going to have children, but I'm not going to let it change my life. But maybe it should change your life. And not just women, I'm going to put that out there. We know that it does disproportionately affect women, and they're the ones whose lives have to change. But I am going to decide for this conversation topic that, as a given, it shouldn't just affect women's lives if they choose to have children. But maybe all the people involved in having children, maybe it should change their life. Now, I know that you had children kind of slightly later on in life. So how do you feel about that? Should it change your life?
I don't understand, like, why are you in the pub all afternoon on a Saturday? I don't understand. And maybe now this is an age thing. Maybe this is a lifestyle thing. Like, I wouldn't take my kids to the pub all afternoon on a Saturday because like there's other things. Of course, they're going to run round and be feral because they're bored. They're in a pub. There is nothing to stimulate them. All there is stuff to overstimulate them in a way, because there's fizzy drinks and there's music playing and there's lights on the fruit machine or whatever. And they're going to run around and it's going to pee people off. And I'm going to be stressed because I'm going to be going, come on, sit down. And you said about the dad or the owner, you know, like you take crayons and stuff. Absolutely. Like if we went out for a pizza, I mean, some restaurants give you like a children's pack or whatever. But if not, we'll take our crayons, we'll take a book. I mean, let's face it, most people these days have their kids on a tablet, which I didn't have. We didn't have that when they were younger. But, you know, they need to be stimulated, and sitting in a pub for a couple of drinks, I don't know how long does a couple of drinks take, 2 hours? They're going to be bored and they are going to run around. So I, as a parent, would go, they are going to run around, they are going to be bored. I've either got to give them something to not be bored, or we need to go somewhere else. And I personally don't think that's
change
bad.
your life. Like, if before children your Saturday afternoons were sat in the pub all afternoon, it's going to have to change your life. Like, if you have children, you're going to have to decide there's something different that you do now.
Yes.
Something that children may enjoy.
Yeah. And I think I see that now. I sound so judgy, but I do. I mean, I see it at our local pub. You go in there sometimes and there's families, couples, whoever, have been there all afternoon, and their kids are running around and they're making a racket. And of course kids run around. Of course kids make a racket. Like, that's what they do. They're kids. And we shouldn't expect kids to always sit perfectly still. And we don't want them to be on a phone. Like, we don't want that. We know that. So why you can't, it's not the kid's fault here, and it's not the pub's fault, is it? Like, if a kid is falling down a cellar thingy-me-jiggy, down, like, what the?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, is I think that there are obviously like real safety risks there then that, you know, we're taking into account. And if those incidents have happened a couple of times, and that's, you know, that's the pub's insurance, it might be that your child would be perfectly well behaved in the pub. But unfortunately, evidently, there are incidences where that is not happening. And therefore, they've implemented things to make sure that doesn't happen in future. You can't do everything on an individual basis, because it just gets...
My view is it's not the children's fault here, because I am bored sitting especially because I don't drink alcohol, sitting in a pub for hours on end. A 4-year-old is going to be climbing the walls, literally. They literally are.
Yeah. And I definitely don't think it's the children's fault.
No.
I don't necessarily think it's individual parents' fault either. I think it's this kind of expectation that you should be able to take children everywhere. I mean, I kind of... See, now I have dogs and I want to take my dogs everywhere, and they don't make a noise and they don't run around. Like, they do leave bits of hair everywhere, and one of them is very elderly and may occasionally do things in places where he shouldn't. And we do bear that in mind. You know, regardless of that, that's a new incident. But I am often quite surprised when pubs don't let dogs in, because I think, really? You know, but if they've had issues with people who take dogs in the past, fair enough, that's their decision. I just don't go there with my dogs if they don't let dogs in. Like, if I need to go there, I don't take dogs. The only time we have had an issue once was when there was a meeting we were supposed to be going to in a pub, and we had the dogs with us after work, and we went in and they were like, oh, we don't let dogs in. And we were like, but this is the ropiest pub in the world. What do you think we're going to do with it? But, yeah, that aside, you know, I am surprised, but I just don't take my dogs there. I don't kick off like there's this big issue that I should be allowed to take my dogs everywhere, because that's just obviously this place does not want me and my tiny little pugs custom. Though the dogs, will keep us there for a long time drinking. So I think they're on the wrong side of
But
things.
this also happens at like weddings. So, more and more people are choosing to have child-free weddings. And there are people that are up in arms about that. I know somebody, mentioning no names, that was invited to a wedding, and it was a child-free wedding, and she had a total fit about it, and how dare they ask for no children, and how outrageous that was. And I remember thinking, well, it's kind of their choice, isn't it? And they weren't anti-children. They don't dislike children. They just didn't want loads of kids running around at their wedding. And I feel like, are we a little bit, I was going, entitled?
It's your party.
Like that. Yeah, but it's a bit like I have a child and it has to go everywhere. Like it has to, as in it's my right. But it's like, well, maybe people can choose not to. What I am surprised about, though,
we did ask for no children at our wedding.
And why?
Yeah, we did ask for no children at our wedding, just because that wasn't the kind of vibe we were going for. I've been to plenty of family weddings with kids running around and dancing and stuff like that. But I think you quite often get a very gendered response to that kind of thing as well, or a very kind of outdated response where people are like, oh, but you're getting married, and therefore the next step in your life is to definitely have children.
Maybe.
How can you not want children at your wedding? So yes, you definitely get that kind of response. I don't think that there is a diminishing of spaces that are friendly to children, though. Do you think that?
No.
Oh, well, that was boring then.
End of the no. Restaurants, for example, are getting much better at creating better children's menus and children's entertainment. You know what I meant by those colouring packs and things. But it's also realising there that your future customers as well. So I was really surprised. I didn't realise that this pub had said no under 18s. And I was obviously very shocked, because of course I can understand, a 5-year-old running around, but a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, they're your future customers, especially when it's a local pub, but also as a 16-year-old can sit and not run around. In fact, most 16-year-olds don't move. They just sit on their phones. And I'm saying, again, I sound very judgy, but I'm a parent of a 16 and an 18-year-old. I should be able to take them to the pub. My son was 18 last week, and we went to the pub, and my 16-year-old, actually 15, nearly 16-year-old, came with us. I mean, she wasn't running around feral. She was able to sit and have a J2O,
I was intrigued by the full ban on under 18s, because I'm guessing that's an easy thing. This is an over 18s pub only. This is what we're saying, is that you could only come into this pub if you're allowed in unattended. Because in theory, you can't go in a pub without
over 16
parents,
I think.
Yeah.
So it's 16, 17.
Are you allowed in over 16 but not allowed to drink? That's what I can't remember what the exact.
But you're allowed to drink if you eat food with your parents. That's another weird rule we have, which is
but that place doesn't sell food.
No, I know.
But yeah, to be fair, I think that's a law that is in most places not really enforced, is it? If you were in a restaurant and they ordered you, and you ordered your 14-year-old a glass of wine with their meal, I suspect that most places wouldn't serve them. Okay. But kind of that. But yeah, I was intrigued by the 18. I wonder if they felt that was easier, because they're not going to ID people when they come in, presumably, unless they look like they need IDing or are trying to buy alcohol. Presumably they're not, on a Saturday afternoon, presumably they're not IDing every single person on the door. So I'm wondering if, in reality, a 16 or 17-year-old would probably be all right if you took them in and they weren't kind of causing any trouble or trying to start fights after 3 pints. I like all pubs obviously reserve their right to allow whoever they want onto the premises, so they can just go, right, no redheads in here. To be fair, I'm not sure how that one would go down in the press, but in theory, as long as they're not breaching any discrimination laws, they reserve the right to allow anyone in that they like. So they could set their age limit at 21. Some places do 25. That kind of thing. So why they would do that, I don't know. But
I wonder if there's something, though, as well, about a pub being a free. So obviously child entertainment spaces, let's just call them that. Don't know what the official name is, cost fortune. So I remember, like, we've got a farm near us, and I think it was like £5 for each child to go in for the day or whatever, which is fine. But the adults had to pay £10. And I was like, I don't even want to be here. And it was like a ball pit thing. They were charging the parents to be in there as well. And I remember like the whole day costing like 50 quid once you bought snacks. It was the place you'd go because the kids are, need to get out and it's raining. You said about rain, you have to walk home in the rain, like that kind of, but it's like 50 quid later. So I think maybe part of the issue is if you can't go to a park because of the weather, or you don't have a park, because let's face it, not everybody lives in a safe place or a green place. Everywhere you do go with children costs quite a bit of money, but the pub or a cafe, let's just say, those kind of, they're free to go, and you can, they can just have orange squash, for goodness sake. So it's actually quite a cheap way of taking your children out of the house. I wonder if there's an argument there about, I wonder if that's why they're also a bit, want to be.
Yeah, I see that. But again, it's appropriateness, isn't there? Because, again, I would argue that we are not in a situation where there is this like lack of child friendly spaces, or spaces just were spaces where children are allowed, let's say. So there are other options. You mentioned a cafe. You may find that in your local area there are a range of cafes, ranging from the garden centre to a kind of posh cafe that does avocado and poached eggs on toast. I don't know, whatever's
definitely
posh,
in Hackney,
like millennials wasting all their money on avocados. But there'll be a range of different kinds of cafes, and there are also a range of different kind of pubs. So if it's the pub particularly that you want to go to, that you fancy a pint and you want to take your children with you, there's Wetherspoons get around. I believe that they're child friendly. Interestingly, not dog friendly. Okay, we sat outside a Wetherspoons in Great Yarmouth just to use their Wi-Fi quickly while we were on holiday, and we were sat outside and we had our dogs in a pram, but there was a woman on the table next to us who had a little dog who was sat on her lap, and somebody came out of the pub and told her she had to leave because dogs weren't allowed in the pub. And she was like, well, we're not in the pub, we're sat outside. But dogs weren't even allowed to sit on the pavement table outside. But interestingly, ours were in a pram, so they didn't notice them and they didn't tell us to leave. But that's another story. And there are a whole range of other places like that, I would say. When you're talking like I don't know, like the chain pubs, Hungry Horses, are they? Beef Eaters, I guess. Those kind of. Yeah, exactly. They've always got kids running around. They're the kind of pubs that will provide you with crayons and stuff like that.
We've got a Brewers Fayre. I was Fayre because it's Fayre, Fayre, and they've got like a ball pit thing like attached to it. And back in day when mine were little and I drank alcohol, that was a great place to go because they shove them in the ball pit. They're running around. Obviously, they weren't babies. You know what I mean? 5, 6 or whatever. In they go, and we could have a drink. So there are places like that, definitely.
So and as I said, I would suggest that the argument, rather than being that there aren't child-friendly spaces, is more like, I don't want to go to the child-friendly spaces.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't a fan, but it was great because the children were happy and could be feral. You know what I mean? They're in a ball pit. They're running around like their life depends on it, and we can sit and be calm. As you said, they exist. So, I mean, they might not exist in Hackney. I have no idea. So I think it's about appropriateness. I think you're right.
You just have to accept that some choices you make in life are going to like maybe affect some of your options. Even when it comes to having the dogs, I accept that they want their dinner at 5 o'clock every night, and therefore I damn well better be home at 5 o'clock every night. There's no going out at 4 o'clock for a drink and coming home at 8 o'clock. Oh, no, like that's unless I'm taking the dogs with me, I have to make that exception. I know that I can't arrange to go on holiday to Spain next week without finding somebody to look after my dogs.
Literally, what you just said about your dog's dinner has made me think, like, tell me you're child-free without telling me you're child-free. Because my dogs will get fed when they're fed. I've got enough to think about. I've got all these other people to feed. I mean, it's different now, they're teenagers, but when they were little, I had cats, and it was like the cats like were lowest of the low of the list of getting fed, and they obviously always got fed before anybody complains. But it's, like if they were like, I want it's 5 o'clock, I'll be like, look, mate, look, cat, I'm dealing with my daughter.
See, this is my mum said that this weekend because they've just got little like Pomeranians, and they've always took the mickey out of us with the pugs, where they were like, oh my God, they'll be fine, leave them alone.
Yeah,
and they were spoiled. And now my mum is like, oh, well, they get sardines for breakfast, and then we give them a little bit of chicken for dinner in the evening. And I'm like, oh, right, and ours are spoiled. And she was like, well, to be honest, I get it now, because whenever we had dogs before, we also had children to look after. So, the dogs came in like bottom of the list. Whereas now the children have left the house. Apparently, I'm not her child anymore, but the children have left the house. The dogs have bumped themselves up.
Yeah,
dogs have bumped themselves up the list till they get sardines for breakfast.
You get fed when you get fed, mate. I've got a lot going on right now. I mean, obviously, they are always fed. They are pampered pooches, but they are lower on the list. But anyway, I have a problem with my dogs going out. As I said, they're Dachshunds. They bark non-stop because they're Dachshunds. That's literally part of their makeup. And so if we took them to a pub and they just barked at everybody, it's an absolute nightmare. We then have to leave, and it's really stressful because they won't calm down. But then, so you don't take them. But if you don't take them, they'll never get used to being around people. So it is that chicken and egg bit, back to where we started. If you don't take...
but then the pub is not a training ground, is it? It's not a training ground for children, and it's not a training ground for dogs. If you want to do that kind of training, then there are places that you could take them to get better at being around people. Pets at home.
They don't bark at pets at home. There's too much to sniff. Yeah, so...
And there we are making a point about appropriate places for dogs and children again.
Well, yeah, back to my local. Not now, but years ago, it did have a problem with drugs. And I remember there being kids running around and doing all that. And it's all just like, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot that's really not appropriate. And also people getting more and more drunk. You might not be as a parent, but what else is going on? What, bad language, for example, some of the things I hear in my pub, in our local pub now. Do I want my 3-year-old sitting next to, so it's not necessarily appropriate either.
And should adults be expected to moderate their behaviour for somebody else's children?
No, is my opinion. I mean, these guys could have moderated their behaviour because they were being assholes and really misogynistic. But, could you tone it down because I've got my child here? I don't know. So they should just tone it down anyway.
Could you tone it down because you're an arsehole? Fair enough.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to say. So, yeah, I'm kind of in agreement, back to the original story. It's their pub. If they can do what they like. And if they've had children falling down the cellar frickin' trap door, then there's a problem, isn't there?
Mm-hmm, definitely. Drunk people may also fall down cellar trapdoors.
Yeah, why was the cellar door trapped? Staff could fall down it, though, I did think when you said it.
Yeah.
Why?
I mean, that did occur. That did occur to me as well. But I don't know. It depends how. I mean, 3-year-olds shouldn't be running around anywhere with a trapdoor. If the trapdoor was just left open very briefly, or anyway. But that aside, their health and safety issues aside, good. Well, I'm glad we fixed that one. We're both in agreement.
Yes, and interestingly in agreement, one as a parent and one as a non-parent. So that's
one as a not parent. So
it's
yes, pick your places, people.
Pick your places. The Brewers Fayre. Thank you for joining us for another roundup of midlife chat, hot takes, and occasional moaning. Well, quite a bit of moaning.
Make sure you hit subscribe so your podcast app gently nudges you every Friday, because honestly, who remembers anything without a reminder these days? And also, we like people liking us because we're very needy.
And if you fancy being extra lovely, leave us a rating or a review. It helps more brilliant women like you find us. Have a great weekend, everyone, and make sure you find time for yourself. You deserve it.